Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time to tackle a blip of a ship in the MCU that still managed to gain a dedicated fan base. It also managed to blossom in seemingly the oddest of times. We're going to be taking a look at IronStrange, sometimes also known as Strange Iron, the pairing of Doctor Strange and Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. This video was the winner of the monthly vote over on Patreon, so thanks so much to everyone who voted. They help keep us on track and also bring forth some videos that otherwise would take a while for us to get to. For those interested, there is another vote ongoing at the time of this recording. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please do follow on social media to stay up to date, know when we're streaming, and just come on over and chit chat about fandom. It's a good time, I swear. Yes, I just did a double thumbs up. So there's actually a fair bit to talk about, so let's get started. The MCU completely turned Marvel shipping on its head, galvanizing it, creating unique works that could be infused with comic canon, or as time went on and the universe became more fleshed out and established, take place exclusively therein. Rising to mainstream and cultural popularity at the same time as fandom culture was hitting a newfound level of versatility, acceptance, and creativity in the early 2010s, MCU ships and fandom were primed to have a lasting impact and many variations. The MCU is one of those fandoms where if you can think it, someone somewhere probably ships it. Now some of these ships rose partially off of comic book canon, either because it was playing out in the film universe or it was simply transferring over, and sometimes the two would intertwine. In the case of IronStrange, it was a very MCU development, which was fascinating in and of itself. Iron Man debuted back in 1963 in Tales of Suspense, while Doctor Strange appeared that same year in a different comic, Strange Tales. Now while these two characters have existed for equal amounts of time, they haven't interacted all that much. Indeed, pre-Illuminati, that being the comic arc Civil War team formed by Tony and some others to help safeguard the world, the two had barely exchanged a word. However, something else was occurring that would lead to a now famous panel between the two, which would itself impact shipping. Iron Man, released in 2008, brought the character of Tony Stark into the public consciousness in a big way, and also tied him together with Robert Downey Jr., who the majority feel was born for the role. However, Tony's snarky, flippant, yet oozing charm and charisma was not exactly like his comic counterpart. In fact, the MCU version was arguably much more personable, if earlier along in the character's development. Of course, mileage varies. However, the success of this film impacted how the character was portrayed in certain comics, which during the Invincible Iron Man run, which ran from 2015 to 2016, Iron Man has oft had problems getting a long-running series going in the modern era, there was a moment between him and Doctor Strange. The awesome facial hair bros panel, featuring a jovial Tony and an exasperatedly put-upon Doctor Strange, and it became a moment many fans wanted to see. Or if not that moment exactly, then at least that style of interaction, especially as it occurred roughly as Doctor Strange was introduced into the MCU universe. The Doctor Strange film starring Benedict Cumberbatch was released in 2016, a few months after Captain America Civil War. This placement will become important, but firstly, let us quickly meet the players in their MCU forms, for those are the ones in play, even if people do bring in a dash of comic canon here and there. Let's start off with Tony Stark. Once a selfish playboy driven by suppressed trauma and a laissez-faire attitude, Tony found his life changed when he witnessed the consequences of his actions and experienced his first betrayal. Humbled, he was set on a heroic path, determined to make the world a safer place for everyone and to atone for the times he had made it worse. Brash, reckless, and snarky, Tony can love deeply and be deeply hurt. He will often put others before himself and frequently ignores his own needs. He can at times be blinded by his own insecurities, which can lead to regrettable actions, and he can't stand to see people suffer. His arrogance is tempered by an ability to deliver. Next up, Doctor Strange. Once an arrogant and cold surgeon, Strange was forcibly humbled when an accident destroyed his hands and hence his ability to work. Forced to examine himself, he found himself wanting and rose to the challenge of learning an art that contradicted all his past beliefs. Still smug and arrogant, Strange takes his responsibilities quite seriously and strives to learn always and keep the universe safe. He has a quick wit, a fair bit of snark himself, and the capacity to withstand great torment, but some have a hard time putting up with him, and it takes a bit to get to his real feelings. Yet at times, he can form fast and meaningful connections, as he appears to have with Tony Stark. Now these two's ship actually began before their canonical meeting in Infinity War, and instead was started by Civil War, which for some broke Stony, and is a film that remains contentious to this day in many fans' minds, not only because of the outcome, but for how it divided the fandom for a time fiercely loosely into Team Tony or Team Cap camps. For some, they never left those teams. For many on the side of Team Iron Man, they felt that Tony just needed to get away from the rogue Avengers, as they came to be called, and that Steve pretty much tried to murder him, and it was time for him to find a new squad. This, when rapidly followed by the introduction of Doctor Strange, the Facial Hair Bros panel, and the general MCU environment of exploring any and all pairings, meant certain shippers were off to the races. Some were drawn to their surface similarities and wanted to see a snark-off. Protective Strange and Cloak were big tags as well at the time. Others felt these two would be able to get under each other's defenses and really share their core selves, and that having both been betrayed by important people in their lives, they wouldn't take a relationship lightly. And of course, others went for pure hooking up smut, some of it channeling an attraction to both actors and their roles. Those who really like to think outside the box, they imagined a world where these two had met beforehand, during their extreme jerk phases, and could be meeting again on new terms as new people. And then of course, there were just the straight up AUs. For a small few, there was some Sherlock on Sherlock transference going on, but that was a subset. Excitement for this pairing grew when set photos revealed the two would be sharing scenes in Infinity War, and that it did appear that Tony had a new squad, largely consisting of who fans thought it would. It was fuel for some, a reaffirmation for others, and a gateway for a few. However, where shippers really got on board was Infinity War, which was quite impressive given that film's conclusion. This film gave fans the interactions they had been curious about, and for some, had been waiting for, and it was quite snarky, as people imagined. But for many, it went to such an extent it felt like flirting. It was also very close, almost like jumping to the level of having known each other for years, not just a few hours. And of course, there was the wink. Why did he wink at him? The two spend the rest of the film grouped together, attempt to save each other, and display a soft closeness and trust that felt far firmer than the time the two had spent together would suggest, even with the extenuating circumstances, which would ultimately lead to a headcanon. And shipper or not, few could deny the intensity of the moment when Doctor Strange gives up the Time Stone to save Tony. There were, of course, other narrative reasons, but given what had transpired in the film up to that point, it still came across as inherently shippable when read through a certain lens. The film's cliffhanger conclusion meant that IronStrange shippers were in a unique position. They had just been given a movie rife with shippable moments, and characters who had the potential for an interesting relationship, but also were smack dab in the middle of canon angst and implausibility. So they did what fans do best. They fixed it. Some did so by skipping over Infinity War, to a world where the threat was dealt with. Others went for a what Infinity War standpoint, while still more just focused on the stories they wanted to tell. There was a focus on Doctor Strange's hands, his insecurity about them, and his scars, and Tony's understanding. There was Strange showing Tony his worth and helping him rebuild himself after Civil War. There were spells gone awry, missions gone wrong, plenty of friends to lovers fix, where everyone knows they like each other but them, and of course, matchmaking fix, demon possessions, straight up demon Tony, Hanahaki, and so much more. For a small ship in the MCU, it produced a great variety of works and some passionate shippers. It also spawned a new headcanon, the Supreme Family, or Strange Family, the Super Family 2.0. That being taking the concept of the Super Family, that being that Steve and Tony are Peter Parker's parents, adopted or otherwise, and applying it to Tony and Stephen Strange. We have done a video on the first Super Family, so if you missed that, of course, you know the deal, card link. With the Strange Family, some fans felt there was a bonus of the paternal relationship Peter and Tony shared canonically, introduced when Spider-Man joined the MCU. Some fans added in a divorced, metaphorically or literally from Steve Rogers element. This new familial unit was one some fans became quite fond of. Another fan favorite was Strange falling for Tony after looking at all the possible futures and seeing how self-sacrificing he was, getting to know him in all of these different timelines. Now for some, part of the appeal of IronStrange was that it felt more manageable than the rest of the MCU transformative fandom works, which could be large and interconnected by the time this ship was having its genesis, and as a result it could be hard to find pieces that focused on only one pairing or a few characters, something which was much more common with IronStrange. For some, they just felt these two characters had chemistry and could complement each other intellectually and emotionally, and that they both deserved some happiness and could find it together. Also, some liked that it is small. People shipping it are well aware it won't be canon and hence are not angling for it, and almost no one talks about it in any real real mainstream sense, which for some shippers made it an ideal safe haven and a comfort ship. Now, of course, like any pairing, not everyone was on board. So why not? What put some people off this ship? Well, some felt these two were too similar, and that their relationship would be toxic, and that they are too emotionally immature to confront any potential issues they could have in a healthy fashion, as both have been shown to not have the best coping mechanisms. Others felt they would be more like two ships passing in the night, hot and heavy for a while, but ultimately doomed to fail. For some, it stemmed from a distaste for one of the characters, or both, or just an indifference and preference for different characters or, of course, ships. Not everyone is here for how arrogant both of these characters are portrayed as. However, for those who preferred other ships, it was often with Tony. Tony was/is a huge fandom bicycle in the MCU, and most who enjoy pairing the character have their favorite pairing, which may not be IronStrange, though there are as ever multi-shippers. For some, this ship was an example of shipping goggles. The idea that fangirls are just looking to pair anybody, anywhere, anytime. Taking excitement over something like a wink, for example, and feeling that it was fandom going too far, and that they were ruining what was potentially just a little ad-lib moment. As IronStrange is a smaller ship, it doesn't meet with as much opposition as some of the bigger ones. And on top of all of this, IronStrange is still in a unique position thanks to Avengers Endgame. Spoilers. Now come spoilers. Unless you're from the future. Wibbly wobbly timey wimey. Endgame continues the closeness of these two characters, but it also kills off one of them. So again, places the pairing in a position of not having canon as a foothold. Not in the sense that fans were looking for it to become canon, but in the sense that there will most likely be no more future interactions, though you never know. However, since the ship started off that way, it will continue on the same way, though for some, Endgame may calm their zeal. However, others will and are living in the realm of the fix-it, working towards new stories or getting these two a happy ending. Are you IronStrange shippers? If so, when did you jump on board? Is your ship still sailing after Endgame? I recently, at the time of this recording, have gone through a lot of IronStrange fics. I think I'm gonna do a dedicated Fic Rec Friday. Just a lot went down. As always, you know the drill. Answer as many as possible, numbered if possible, because I love a good essay comment. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to spend it discussing fandom and shipping with me. I always appreciate it. There are, of course, as always, more videos coming soon, so if you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. I will see you all again when I can, and until then, let's get to that outro. Bye-bye. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all of my patrons, names on the side, for helping to make these videos possible. There are, as always, more videos coming soon, so until then, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.